Oh, we are live.
Ah,
Jimmy D and the Wolf podcast.
whenever I would know.
You cut out. Say that again.
Whenever I would know.
Man, you're cutting out.
Uh-oh.
Let me see if I can.
You got me?
No, you're cutting out.
That's fine.
Yeah.
Is that better?
I think it could be. Yeah.
How about that?
Let's try that.
Okay. Gremlin.
Well, I'm exiting out a bunch of other stuff on my channel.
I did the same thing, dude. Tabs on.
So, not too many things going now. I better not exit out things that we're using for this live. It would suddenly go dead. That wouldn't work. Can you hear me all right?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. Wonderful.
What's that?
Well, right now I'm working on a song to try to get it done, to get it up on YouTube. It's a song I wrote 10 years ago. I think I might have played it for you. It's called Halfway to Amarillo. Do you remember hearing it?
I do.
And it's interesting because the reason that I put it on the shelf, I guess, I allowed other people to make comments on my songs, and other songwriters. And a guy that I was writing with at the time, somewhat narcissistic, I've told you about him. I played it for him, and there's a rhyme in there. I rhymed Amarillo with pillow. Tears on my pillow. She's halfway to Amarillo. And he said, yeah, that's a really predictable bad rhyme. And so I thought, then that's a bad rhyme. But what got me going on it was I was listening to Lightning 100, and they play a lot of Americana alternative, alt country kind of stuff, which is kind of right down the pike I think for you and me.
Sure.
And they played a song by a famous artist. I can't remember which artist, but like an Americana type artist. And the song it was an art. I knew the artist, but I can't right now remember who the artist was. And the song was Sweet Amarillo. And in the chorus, he rhymed, or whoever wrote the song rhymed pillow with Amarillo.
Wow.
And I'm like, you blankety blank. Here's a signed, successful, and the Hot 100 guy, the DJ, said, man, I love this song. It's one of my favorite songs from this group. Blah, blah, blah. Have you ever heard of the song Sweet Amarillo?
No.
Yeah, I'll have to look it up later. So I revisited. Hey, Steve, how's it going? Steve Vest is here. Steve Vest in the house. So,
What's up?
So I revisited the song, and with a new look, new ears, new eyes, and I thought, man, this is a pretty doggone good song. And I tried to learn the chords because I hadn't written down the chords, and it's a very complex song. It uses every chord in it except for the diminished the seventh diminished. So it's got a 2, a 3, a 4, a 5, a 6,
Mm-hmm.
and and it's not a 3-chord 1-4-5 song. And I'm like, man, 10 years ago, Tim wasn't a bad songwriter. And it's got some pedal steel. I think the reason that it didn't sound very good is my mixing chops were really not very good.
I know you worked really hard.
Say it again?
I know you worked hard at that.
I have worked really hard. And so I didn't record. Well, I had to re-record the acoustic guitar um, because the acoustic guitar wasn't usable. But I kept the lap steel solos, which are really fine. I love them. I mean, they're amazing. In fact, my gear wasn't very good, and the sound is really good, considering that I've spent thousands and thousands of dollars on gear since then, and I had the primitive gear back then, and the lap steel sound. Well, you have to listen to the song. I'm going to put it out. Jimmy, you've got an echo. Steve says.
I wonder what's going on.
Let me try something here. Echo cancellation. I'm going to hit the echo cancellation.
Is that better?
Is that better, Steve? I hit the echo cancellation. I normally leave it off because it interferes with my music when I do music. Okay, he said it's better. So I'll have to remember to do that. Thank you for that, Steve. I appreciate it.
It's so tell people when it's going. It's like I've played a lot of shows where you'll play 3 hours or 4 hours, and at the end of the night, somebody come up and be like, "Man, you couldn't hear your vocals, or you couldn't hear the bass, or the guitar was so loud it was painful." It's like you had all night to tell me that.
Yeah.
So good looking out, Steve.
Thank you, Steve. So anyhow, I only thing I re-recorded was acoustic, the bass, the lead guitar, and the lap steel. I kept it all. I redid the vocals. I did redid the vocals, vocals and the acoustic guitar, and a new drums. Okay, I keep adding things that I'm re-adding. I guess I did replace about 40% of the tracks. So, but the leads were fine. I mean, I'm like, man, I like these leads. So there's both electric guitar leads and lap steel leads on it. And man, it's got a lot. It's got a bridge and a solo section. It's got a lot of sections. I'm like, man, I was a complex songwriter back then. I don't think I put that many sections in my songs now when I write them.
It's from playing in church, man. Church songs are the hardest songs in the world. They're like A B C D E F G A C H I J. The form on church song. It's insane, dude. I've looked at some of that stuff like, how long is this?
Yeah. At my church, I play in the worship band. In fact, we're playing tomorrow night on a Wednesday night special, first Wednesday. We often play on the first Wednesday, not every first Wednesday, but often. And yeah, sometimes the Nashville numbering system charts are a lot of sections, no doubt. So,
especially with the newer stuff, man.
So, and there'll be bridge 1 and bridge 2, two different kinds of bridges.
Right.
Bridge 1, and then the chords change for bridge 2. Yeah. And then sometimes we're doing it on the fly, and the music director will say, "We'll go on the bridge," and I'm like, "Which bridge? They're two different ones."
Well, I know what you mean. I mean, when you're talking about your songwriter friend or acquaintance, kind of making fun of the line, and I think we all deal with that because you go through all these channels of like songwriter critiques. If you join Nashville Songwriters Association or Taxi or anything like that, and when I first became a member of NSAI, where I kind of got to where I could take it with a grain of salt, was I would submit the same stuff, submit the same material. So you might get it, one person say, "Well, your lyrical chops just aren't up to par." Or, you have no understanding of form, and you send the same song to the next critiquer, and they just rave about it. And you send it again, and somebody might be right in the middle with it. So it's so objective. But I think now, because everybody's opinion is heard, when the information age and technology, and everybody has an opinion, everybody's quick to voice it. So I mean, you could make the argument that there's never been a harder time to be a songwriter. Because I say that, man, because like if you get in a publishing house, or say you get a pub deal with one of the major publishing companies, they're not just, expecting you to write hits. They give out tip sheets. So they'll kind of give you words that they expect to be in songs. And they actually really do that. They analyze, what songs have been or what words have been the most common words in hit songs for the last year or 2 years or whatever. And that's how these trends happen. And country is the worst. That's why you have these trends where all at once every song you'll hear on country radio will say Dixie Cup or cut off jeans or on the tailgate of the pickup truck, or it's predictable. I mean, really, and it's because they have tip sheets. The songwriters that are working in the major publishing houses, they give them tip sheets with all these words on it. And they're like, use these words. These are good words right now. And, it's...
They don't care if the song is good or not. They just care if it gets cut. They want to
exactly
what cuts.
And there's no way that anything is going to have any kind of staying power because they're adhering to what's working now. So nobody, I mean, the parameters that writers are operating within with the major publishing houses are, it's almost impossible for them to make something that's timeless.
Yeah. And
before all that changed in country music, you had the occasional song in the 90s. It was like, man, that's a banger and it's never going to go away. That's always going to be there. And that, I don't feel like that happens anymore.
Steve says, interesting. I didn't know that. I assumed it was solely the songwriter doing that.
Yeah, bro. They've got it on an assembly line. Which is why, I mean, if you watch the Grammys, I mean, most of the people that win Grammys and most of the people that win these major awards are not on major labels. Because if you're innovative at all, you're probably going to do it with an independent label or do it by yourself.
Or, I mean, what these people in Nashville is set up for, not completely, but it's set up for writing for cuts. And even if you like Songtown, I was a member of Songtown for a couple of years, and I remember they had their annual event, and it was a full day, jam-packed with a lot of information. And I remember I went there, and I was dealing with some discouragement and with them anyway. And I went to this first seminar, and it was packed. And I had my coffee there, and I could barely move my arms because you're all packed in. And they started talking about make sure you know what the vocal range of your target. You target an artist. Are you writing this for Toby Keith? Are you writing this for? That's the first name that came to mind. That's old school. Who would be modern? Modern. Chris Stapleton. Well, he writes his own.
Yeah.
Make sure you know their vocal range, and make sure you write for that artist and write for a specific artist when you write. And I'm like, I'm out. That's not what I want to do. And I got up and walked out.
Right. Exactly. Because if they were really, an artist, they should be able to hear a great song, no matter what key it's in, and say, hey, let's slap a capo on the third fret or something to that extent.
Steve says, reminds me of the art government building gas cans. Let the artists be artists. Well, that is the thing. I mean, there's a radically different mindset and process for writing for the pub houses and writing for cuts versus writing as an artist.
Mm-hmm.
Those are two completely different things. I mean, if one of them is songwriting, the other one isn't really, in a way.
Yeah.
Would you agree with that, Jimmy?
Absolutely.
If you're writing as an artist, you want to be different. You don't want to be, I mean, at least I do. I don't want to sound like, I don't want to be an Allah where you can say it sounds exactly like so-and-so, because that'll trouble you for your entire life.
Yeah. Well, that's how they end up with these hybrid monsters, like monster musicians like Chris Stapleton. And I feel that Brad Paisley's one of those, Daryl Scott. Those guys, at some point, it's like they knew they could pump out the songs, and it's like, well, you're not cutting the songs that I love. I mean, all those cats had massive success as songwriters, and and they're just they're freaks, man, because I mean they can play it, they could sing it, but at some point they said, well, you know, I'm writing you a song a day or 2 songs a day or 4 songs a day, and you never cut the ones I like the most. That's what happened with all 3 of them.
Who were the other one, Daryl? What were the 3?
Daryl Scott's one of my heroes, man. He's had tons of cuts. He wrote Great Day to Be Alive, and he wrote a bunch of the hits for the Dixie Chicks. And he just got in this place that, you know, he was tired of them just cutting what he felt like was just the commercial stuff and not his favorite songs. So he kind of branched out and did the artist thing.
Who was the third one? Chris Stapleton was one. Who was the?
Chris Stapleton and Brad Paisley.
You said 3 people. Who was the third?
Paisley.
Oh, Paisley, right. Paisley. Right.
Paisley's an insane guitar player.
I know he is.
He's had pub deals to where they're just cutting stuff that, and now he has that lady that writes with him, and they figured out an interesting thing now to where she writes the lyrics, he puts it to music, and it's just like a recipe for success. And they're just pumping stuff out like crazy now, but it took him a long time to get in that place, you know. But it's interesting because, I mean, where's the value? Where's the value in that? Of, to me, it's like a paint by numbers kind of thing. How well you write a song based on a chord structure that is presented to you after being handed a tip sheet doesn't really have anything to do with how good of a songwriter you really are.
Yeah, you're just filling in the. You're on the assembly line, right? You're just putting.
I mean, a Bob Dylan or Townes Van Zandt or any of those guys, they wouldn't do well in that environment. They just wouldn't.
I mean, now there's such a thing.
Even Mick couldn't do it, I don't think.
Now there's such a thing as top lining, where that's very, very common in pop music, and it's becoming more common in the younger writers in country. And that is where there's a track that's developed, a beat, often they call it a beat, and there are specialists that are called top liners that come in and just go into a vocal booth and try to sing stuff over the top of it. Maybe they have some notes, maybe they try to improvise as they go and try to write over the top of it on the spot. And that's not the finished recording, but that they'll make that to demo, possibly maybe a 2-3 hour session, and try to come up with a song or 2 top lining. And then because the beat's already made, and that's a very common thing. And it's even coming into country as well, because country is getting more of that type of. Country always gets influence from pop and follows their trends in some way later, probably a few years after. So that's a very common thing. So then you're just basically a lyricist. You're just coming up with you got a pre-described foundation, and you're coming up with the melody and the lyrics. You're coming up with those 2 things, but the rhythm of the song and the harmony of the song, the chords, is already established. So that's a very common way things are done today, creeping into country. And, that's why I think a year or so ago, there was an article that came out, and it tabulated the top 25 songs on the Hot 100, which are not mostly country, because country usually doesn't make it that far, but these are mainly pop and hip hop. The top 25 songs on the Hot 100, the average number of writers per song was 9.5.
It's crazy.
And the main reason that got skewed so much, because there was one that had 19 writers, and it really skewed the average up. So 1 out of the 25 had, I think, 19 writers. And so, you know, because when you're making a beat and you're taking samples from previous songs, maybe funk songs or Parliament songs or P-Funk songs or whatever, and you've got to give them credit. And so you end up, there's so many people on there that get a credit and is a part credit of the songwriting.
I read today that James Brown is the most sampled artist of all time.
Wow.
I read that today. So it's funny you say that. And it makes perfect sense, because all the early hip hop stuff, even a lot of the Parliament stuff, was James Brown samples. It's crazy. Well, I would have more respect for people writing in that vein, top lining, where at least you got somebody in there improvising. At least there's some kind of jazz element to it.
Yeah, yeah, improvisation of it. Yeah.
But it's, you know, they've kind of put these, there's lanes now, and that's not rock and roll, I don't think, or you know, it doesn't catch that element. I mean, how could somebody write, you know, every sporting event I've ever been to in my entire life, at one point or another, I've heard the song that goes da 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 da, hey da 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 da, hey da 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 da. That's all it says in the whole song is hey. That you can, that would live and die in somebody's living room right now if that was written today. And there's a bunch of songs like that, or rock songs where they made up words or just sounded things out. You know, they've taken a lot of the freedom out of it, I believe, personally.
Well, for one, I think there's so much music that's being uploaded. I mean, Spotify, anybody can upload songs. So there's so much music that's uploaded, and Spotify wants to get to the point where 40,000 artists can make a living from Spotify. They're not there; they're far away from it. But 40,000, that's never been in the history of the world. That, you know, now there's the it's the best of times and the worst of times. Best of times that anybody can have access to the distribution. You don't need a record label. But the worst of times is that there's an awful 99% of it is crap, and you got to plow through that. And people actually have fatigue. We've talked about this before. People have fatigue with onboarding and even being willing to listen to new music that they're not familiar with, a new artist that they don't know. And especially after you turn 30, science has shown you're much less likely to try new music. Now, there are exceptions, but on average, we all tend to love the music that was popular when we were teenagers.
I'm guilty, man. I mean, I'm terrible about that. I still listen to the Beatles and the Allman Brothers and old jazz and Hendrix and blues. Listen to a lot of new music. It's not that I don't like it.
I try to listen, like I listened to Lightning 100, which I mentioned, which is the local station, which is a phenomenal station. And they have, and they'll sometimes play older stuff. You know, they were playing some Police songs the other. Their weekend, Memorial Day weekend. They went A to Z, starting I think on Friday all the way through Monday night, or maybe they started. I think they started Friday. So they started with artists. You know, the band name or their artist name started with an A. I think they were going with last name started with an A, and they all went through. And I remember when I was in my car, I was listening. There was one time they were on C, you know, and played the Clash and some other bands, you know, and so they do play older stuff. And then Tom Petty, they were playing Petty when I saw the P's. So they make an effort to dig up older stuff. And then on my way to church in the morning, and Sunday morning, I have to be there by 8:15 or by 8 to set up because I play Sunday. And on the way, Lightning 100 has Acoustic Cafe, and I think it's syndicated. I don't know where they have it, but they have these artists that come in and play their songs that they play them live in the studio. And I've been introduced to a whole bunch of artists that I wasn't aware of, because there's that middle class of artists that are making a living and maybe you don't know who they are. Like one of my mentors, I'm in his mentoring course. His name is Chris Greenwood. He goes by the artist name Manifest.
Sure.
I'd never heard of him until I came across his training, and I have twice a month coaching with him. I'll look forward to meeting him. He's a real cool guy. And he's in the Christian world, Christian rock, and also in the secular kind of rapping, kind of Blink-182. I think he once mentioned some of his artists that he's similar to. And he's had a record deal. He's been around. He talks about how some of the stories he tells, like he was touring China, and The guy was supposed to meet him at the airport to pay him for the tour. It was like $40,000 or something, and the guy never showed up. And here he is stranded in the Shanghai airport, and he had to pay his band. And he's had some difficult times. He's been doing this for 20 years, and his streams on Spotify he's growing recently. He's up to 700,000 monthly streams. That's a lot of streams.
Amazing.
Goal is to get to 1 million by the end of the year. 1 million streams. Most people have never heard of him. He's making good income. He's making well into 6 figures. He's making 6 figures just from merch sales. And most people haven't heard of him. So there's a lot of artists in that middle class that are making it. Steve says, I've reverted back to the old stuff. This is probably a comment he made a few minutes ago, and I didn't see it. I've reverted back to the old stuff that I've never heard of or enjoyed. Yeah, I like listening to old stuff. Even that if I haven't heard it, it has a certain vibe to it. So, I mean, there are and so Acoustic Cafe introduces to a whole bunch of artists, and those are real songwriters. They're in there playing their songs that they wrote, and they're playing them with their acoustic guitar, usually, sometimes with piano, but usually acoustic guitar. And that's real artists to me. They can deliver the song.
And you bring up something that's an interesting point of, about Chris Greenwood. Most people have no idea who he is, but he's crushing it.
He is.
The general consensus is, if you're not on TV or I haven't heard you on the radio, you're not a successful artist. But the fact of the matter is that there is lots of meat on the bone there. I mean, some of the people that are making the most money, nobody even knows who they are. Some of the writers, and I mean, what is success?
Harry Hurstan loves to say, why is music the only industry where the measure for success, you have to be on TV? What if your measure for success was for every profession? You call a plumber. He says, are you on TV?
Sure.
No, then you must not be successful.
Right.
Local chef at your local restaurant. What's that?
You don't have a commercial?
Or even not just commercial, but I mean, not paid, but I mean, you're being interviewed, you're on talk shows. You don't go on late night talk shows? Right. You must not be successful. Because the equivalent would be not paying for commercials. The equivalent would be, I don't know, interviewing you on the local show saying, hey, you're the local plumber of the week here, and we want to learn about you. Or the local restaurant, the local chef, or the local insurance salesperson.
Right. Well, I used to miss the boat on that whole thing, man. When I was in like my late 20s, I was just like, man, I'm failing. It's just not working out for me. And I meet people and they say, what do you do? And I said, I'm a guitar player. I'm a musician. They said, what's your regular job? No, that's what I do. And they're like, you make a living doing that? And I'm like, well, yeah, I've kept the lights on so far. And they go, wow. And, that I was succeeding, even though I felt like I was failing the entire time, because I had that metric of, man, I'm not making it. I'm not making it. Does that make sense what I'm saying? Like,
sure. Yeah. Because that's the mindset. People will say, when are we going to hear your songs on the radio? When are we going to see you on TV? But that's the default.
Right.
And it's unfair. It's not fair. Because
the inverse of that is that now they see these people on TV, on American Idol or The Voice, and they see them, they go, oh, this person's famous. And guess what happens to 99% of them after the show's over? They go away.
Yeah. Well, I had a conversation in my church, my relatively small church. Of course, this is Nashville, and Franklin, where I go to church, is kind of a lot of musicians live there. It's kind of the higher end, the hoity-toity area, higher income. The schools are phenomenal. Some of the best schools in the nation, they say. So a lot of people live there. And in our church, in our small church, there are two guys who were on The Voice, and we're on not just we're literally got selected by a team. I think both of them might have gotten selected by Team Blake. They didn't, and then they were eliminated a week or two later. But I was talking to the one on Sunday, just having conversation because he was playing and we were done practicing. We had some time waiting for the service to start, and we started talking. And he told me a bit about his perspective of it. And he said that he had had a writer's deal with a publishing house, and he was writing songs like we talked about earlier, and also trying to do the artist thing. And he had been, see, The Voice is curated. They invite you. They don't like I don't know if American Idol still does it. They've had their reset. They were shut down for a few years and they came back. Maybe they've reset it. But The Voice is they literally find people and invite them to come. And he had been invited for a couple of years and always said no. And because apparently he had a good manager or whatever, he had enough visibility that they knew about him and they wanted him to be on the show. And he finally, at the end, he said toward the end of his artist, because he stopped doing the artist thing. He's got a family, he's got a wife, he's got kids, and so he said it's just time for him to. So now he's in IT. Anyway, so and apparently enjoying. So he said that in 2017 he decided to stop, or no, he decided to give in and actually do The Voice. And he said it really didn't move the needle for his career. It was really not worth it, is what his judgment of it was. And it was shortly after that he actually stopped doing music. Anyway, and he said, I don't know if you've heard, you probably know that they lock you up. If you go in, either one of them, they lock you up. Anything you do, you can't do anything without them getting their cut. Once you get on there was a guy in Iowa when I was living in South Dakota. I auditioned to be in his band, and I was going to be in his band for a short minute, and then that's a long story. Another narcissist story. I think I told you that story. And he was on The Voice. He was on The Voice, yeah, because he was on team. It wasn't Blake who. Maybe it was Blake. He was country guy, and he said everything he did after that was locked up for like 2 years. And he was only on for like 1 week or 2 weeks, and then he got eliminated. So they tie you up. And my church friend told me that he was gone for 3 months, and he had to go out to LA and do the whole thing. They paid for everything, but he was away from his family, and he didn't care for that. And it sounded like it wasn't the greatest experience. But now behind his name, of The Voice, was on The Voice. Oh. So you've got that.
Right.
But it doesn't really move the needle for an artist. 99% of them fall into obscurity, and it doesn't move the needle.
And they're essentially shelved. They're encumbered by whatever agreement they signed with them. I mean, it's interesting because truly you're better off to be 100% independent anymore.
And there's rumors that all of these shows are produced. Maybe not all of them. Is The Voice actually live, or do they pre-record it and then do it?
I don't know.
I think they pre-record, but I'm not sure. But I know that the one where they dress up in costumes, the mysterious singer or whatever it is.
Yeah.
What was that? The mystery singer or whatever it was called?
I don't remember the name.
Really weird costumes that look like you couldn't even sing it. Like dressed up like a huge spider or something. What's it called? That show? It's a big hit thing. And you can't see their lips moving. They may not even be singing because they're hidden behind a thing. It could be pre-recorded. And in fact, there is research that says, because a lot of those people are not even singers. They're just everyday people like comedians or whatever. And they come on and they sound phenomenal. Well, the reason is because their voice is tuned and produced, quantized and tuned, and then rebroadcast. And they may not even be singing to it. It's lip syncing, or they don't even have to move their lips because their mouth is covered. and it's not produced live. Now, I don't know how much of that is going on in the voice, or maybe none, But I know some of those talent shows have that.
I think my voice actually sounds worse when it's tuned because I'm usually closer to the wrong note than the right one.
The Masked Singer, yeah, that's it. The Masked Singer. Yeah, there's articles that I've read that said that is all produced, tuned, and just a lot of afterwork magic done because to make that sound good.
Well, they can polish anything up.
So, heck, even Pentatonics uses Autotune. I mean, a cappella group, that was because I read a lot of magazines about production. One of my favorite ones is Tape Op, but for the engineers, and they were interviewing the producer for Pentatonics, the a cappella group. Huge successful. And the guy was describing how he produces, and he didn't make a big deal about it, but he says, my vocal chain is this, and I do this and this and this, and then I go use Autotune, and then I use Melodyne, which is another Autotune thing. It was just describing it. It wasn't like a big revelation. They use, but it's even Pentatonics. So most records produced today, the only one, Pink says that she doesn't use it, but I was talking with the producer about that, and he said, not that she knows of.
Exactly. Not always your decision to. I mean, that's up to the engineer. Because
today the standards are so high. Sure. And when I was on that month-long thing at West Hollywood with Westlake, and they had some tracks. One day, the president came in, Al Matura. He co-owns the cool guy. He's the guy that brought in those cookies. And he says, Lenny brought those in. And I said, Lenny, who's Lenny? We don't have any Lenny in our class. He said, yeah, Lenny Kravitz. And I'm like, I'm not going to eat this. Right. Frame it. Anyway, so that's common for him, for Lenny to drop by and leave cookies.
Sure.
Anyway, he had some tracks, actual solo tracks of the multi-track of some of these very, very famous songs. Like there was the Beatles, Little Help from My Friends with Ringo singing. And when you isolate that, and there were a number of them, even with really good singers. And he said, when we first heard these, we thought these got to be demos. They can't be the real ones. And they said, yeah, these are. But they had techniques that mask and to even though if you're Autotune, because they didn't have Autotune back then, but they had ways to mask it and to hide it and to help it. One way that they did, that's why all the Beatles would double track every vocal. Not harmonies, but singing the melody line. And that's that's kind of an Autotune, because the average of the two of them is what you're hearing, and you're probably not going to be off equally at every note on both times you sing it. So that was kind of a prehistoric, if you will, Autotune. And so it's been around ways. And so he played some of these tracks. Man, I'd probably go through my notes, but there were tracks that were, I knew every word to these tracks. And when he played the isolated vocals, all of us students just looked at each other and said, this is horrible. But when it's in the recording, it sounded phenomenal. And we're used to hearing it. But now the standards, if those records were released today, in fact, when they remaster, they do go in and Autotune. I'm sure they do. Because when you hear a remastered, it sounds so much cleaner, and it's also been tuned. So kind of the dirty secrets of music production. Everybody expects it to be perfectly in time as well, because you can go in and you can move the hits, the strums, whatever it is. You can move the syllables of the singing to make sure it's completely in time. And so that's what people are used to now. And you can hear.
They can do to take the human element out of it.
Well, There's that, and there are people that are pushing back against that. You know, David Grohl, he bought the Neve console from Sound City, and he told his engineer, he said, if I see any digital gear in this studio, you are fired immediately. We're recording to tape. We're using this Neve console, and absolutely no digital gear. We're not going analog to digital back to analog. We're staying analog, no digital gear at all.
Right.
And so there are people like that. You know, David Grohl can do it. I mean, he's Hall of Famer guy, and he's got a second band he's very successful with. So. Are you about to get hit, Jimmy? Yeah. What are you looking at over there, Jimmy?
My wife.
Oh. She's sweet.
Yes.
Well, we've been going 40 minutes. We can let you go.
Always a pleasure.
Hi, Tim.
Hi, Katie. All right. Thank you for hanging with us. Please leave us comments. Give us suggestions, what you'd like us to talk about, topics. We appreciate you very much, whether you're watching this with us live or on a replay. Thank you so much.
Thanks. See you.
Next time.